This is Metal Mike, and I give you a special episode of the 80's Glam Metalcast,
Stryper Fest.
On this one, I'm joined by Pastor Wildman and Steve from the Wildman and Steve Show podcast. We have a blast together. We reveal our top 5 favorite Stryper albums. We talk in depth about the albums. We also talk about the band's 80's image and the 80's videos. You're free to do what you want to, but my suggestion is to check this out. Pastor Wildman and Steve, welcome to the 80's Glam Metalcast. How you guys doing tonight?
We're doing good as far as I can tell. How are you doing, Steve?
You know what? I am doing fantastic, man. And Mike, it's good to be on your show.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Good to talk to you again. As people will find, I was on your podcast and we talked about 80's metal, and you guys are going to be on my podcast, and we'll probably talk about some 80's Christian metal. Sound like a plan?
Perfect.
Sounds good.
Well, why don't you guys talk about your podcast? Tell everybody what you do so they know a little bit of your background.
Well, basically, the show started a little over a year ago. I had been doing some podcasting on my own, and I invited this guy named Steve Perkins that I heard about to be a guest just to talk about music in general, because I knew that him and I both had the same the same interest in music and from the same era and the same interest in faith. And so contacted him, interviewed him, and then he just never went away. So he became a permanent co-host, and from then on, it has just grown over that first year that we just completed. It has grown more than we ever expected it to grow.
That's awesome. Steve, anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think Wildman said it all. It's just been so much fun talking to great artists, connecting with fans as well, and really trying to make those connections between fans and musicians, between musicians and a wider fan base for them. And as we say, trying to just help everybody connect with Jesus.
Awesome.
Yeah. I just wanted to add again that, Steve and I have admitted this on our show, but we use the podcast in many ways as an excuse to talk to the artists that we love. So it's pretty much like a backstage pass, just about every episode.
Same here. So obviously you guys specialize in Christian rock and metal, and you've interviewed some of the members of Stryper, correct?
Right.
We have. Yeah, Michael Sweet and Oz Fox.
Awesome. So obviously you guys are the right dudes for the job to discuss a top 5 of Stryper's albums. So what I was thinking is we'll go around the horn. Steve, we'll start with you, and we'll just go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, I did that right. And I'll notate everybody's choices, and then we'll kind of go back around and do a round table and discuss each of the albums, what we like about each of them. So, Steve, man, start us off.
Well, I got to tell you, Mike, I was really thinking about my list through this afternoon. After you talked with us about this prior to the show, I've been thinking about it, and oh man, the Stryper catalog for a lot of people really kind of is in 2 pieces. There's a classic sound that was really the 80's up through about 1990 there with Against the Law, and then you've got the really the last set of new albums here in the 2000s, and you had a few other things there in between, but you kind of got the 2 halves of the catalog, and it's really, really difficult to try to pick a top 5 out of that really broad band of broad body of work that they've done. But number 5 coming in for me is Goddamn Evil. Love that album. Love the title track. Love the opening Ticket to the Cross. That's number 5 for me. I will tell you, 2, 3, and 4 were the really tough ones for me as to which to put in which order. I really knew that they were in this section. 4 is No More Hell to Pay. And I will confess, No More Hell to Pay could have actually been number 1 for me. I absolutely love the album, start to finish. I think it is fabulous. Number 3 for me would be To Hell with the Devil. So going back to the classic now, the 80's sound for them. And then coming in at number 2, which again is going to have easily been number 1, I've heard Michael Sweet say that in a lot of ways he really liked this album. One of the best for him that he enjoyed making was Soldiers Under Command. Again, just another one, just fabulous, classic hair metal sound from the 80s. And coming in at number one for me is their most recent album, Even the Devil Believes.
Wow, very nice. Very good list. Very, very good. And we'll dig deeper into all those in a second. Wildman, what do you got, man? What do you got?
All right. Well, I would agree with Steve that it is difficult because looking back through their whole catalog, I mean, you can choose certain things that you like better than others, but it's hard to find one that you just throw away. You know, every project was great. But coming in at number 5, I put my 5th one is Even the Devil Believes. Their most recent one, and Steve's laughing over there because there's going to be some mix-up here as far as our opinions. It's coming in at number 5, and a lot of it is because their musicianship was just top-notch with this latest album, and so that's why I put it at number 5. Number 4 for me is Reborn. That's one of the forgotten ones. The first one they did coming out of their retirement, so to speak, in the early 2000s. And a lot of the reason I chose Reborn was because that was the one that kind of reintroduced them to everybody. And I do love the sound. I love the sound on Reborn, even though it was on the pop metal side. I'm kind of into a little bit of that. Number 3 was To Hell with the Devil. Classic sound, you cannot beat it. And the sound and the message and the hard-hitting message of the day, I remember when that came out and hearing it, that took the world by storm. There's no question. Number 2, Goddamn Evil for me. Love the album, especially the title track, Take It to the Cross. The title track especially, I just love that classic 80s sound. Number 1 for me, Against the Law. And the reason I like Against the Law, that's the one that is the most controversial. It was the last one they did before they broke up and went their separate ways and came back. But I love Against the Law because the sound. They did divert from the Stryper sound, and I love the Stryper sound, but it was almost like, for me, that I was able to say, hey, guys, look, these guys can rock just like anybody else, because Against the Law, they did. They just let it rip, and I really appreciated that.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, here's what I got. You know, definitely some similar ones as you guys. But here's one that neither of you have. What I really like is number 5. I've got Murder by Pride. I really dig that album. And now that I look at this one, my rest of mine are probably very predictable. 4, Against the Law, and exactly what you said. Wildman, I was just jamming on it today. I love the heaviness. I love the sound quality. I know they deviated from their message a bit, but man, it's just a killer album. It really is. 3, I got to go In God We Trust. I love In God We Trust. I realize it's very much a copycat of To Hell with the Devil, but it's still very good. Number 2, To Hell with the Devil. And number 1, man, I got to go Soldiers Under Command. I just love Soldiers Under Command. So those are my 5.
Great.
So let's talk about some of these, and if you want, we'll go around the horn in the same order. However, we'll just do whatever. But let's talk about a few of these. So obviously, I mean, I'm very familiar with all the ones you guys mentioned, but talk a little bit more about Goddamn Evil, because that's one where you guys both picked that one. Actually, Steve, no, you did Even the Devil Believes as number 1, but you guys both have that on your list. So why don't you guys talk about that one a little bit? Why do you guys like that one so much?
I think it similar to what Wildman said. I think it's strong. It's strong lyrically. It's incredibly strong musically. I like the fact that they experimented with Take It to the Cross. Not everybody liked that. I liked it. I like it when an artist says, in this case, the whole band, say, look, we're not just stuck in a formula. We are musicians. We like to explore. We like to create. We like to do new things. And I really appreciated that. And again, lyrically, that song I thought was very solid. To me, the title track is just there's a fellow, Lee Spencer, who does Iridium Music and Reviews on YouTube. He's a huge Stryper fan, but again, all things really classic rock and so forth. And he'll always say, it's like, oh, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. And honestly, that song is just incredible for me. The swagger, really the attitude coming out of that song. And again, the message behind that one as well. And then again, several others. Now, I will be quick to say, though, I could have easily replaced that with Reborn. I really considered Reborn at one point, which Wildman brought up. I absolutely adore. I just wore Reborn out when it first came out. I love it. It was very heavy. I really liked it a lot. But Against the Law, man, I was really waffling. And again, with the 5, it's like, I'm going to be a little bit more in the classic side or a little bit more on the modern side. I wasn't kind of sure which way to go there. But Against the Law is just fabulous and start to finish and blistering as well. But I think maybe the thing maybe I would have picked the goddamn evil is, again, the production. The most recent albums, the production level has just been off the charts.
Wildman, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, for Goddamn Evil, I would agree with everything Steve said. I mean, I would also say that as a guitarist, the title track, I loved it. It's one of those where you know that as a fan and a guitarist, you're listening for that certain sound, and you want bands to do that certain sound, but yet they have their own sound. And Stryper has always had their own sound, but when you listen to the title track as a guitarist, I listened to that thinking, they got it. They did what I wanted, and I appreciated that, and that was that definite classic metal that I would say even diverted from the classic Stryper sound. It was more on the lines of an AC/DC sound, in my opinion, and I really liked that fist pumping sound. Take It to the Cross, again, that was one that it had to grow on a lot of people, I think, and I think it had to grow on me. But the way they introduced it, I thought was the best, because they came out with the video. And if you remember when that video came out, I remember watching it when it first came out, and it was just a lyric video. It was all that it was. But it just had that introduction, that powerful introduction of, zooming in and then landing and then here we are kind of a thing to start the song off was just an incredible start. And I just I love the imagery that they did with that song. And so that's why Goddamn Evil is second on my list. And in fact, I mean, the rest of the tracks are great, and I'm one of those crazy guys. I just need a couple tracks to say an album's great.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you guys. I know wasn't in my top 5, but I agree. I like how they took some chances lyrically and even musically. And they've really have done that a lot in their career. They haven't always played it safe. And maybe let's kind of talk about Against the Law when it comes to not playing it safe. So obviously that was a big chance that they took. They took a step away from the subject matter, even their colors, right? They got rid of the yellow and black. And it's a very interesting album, Against the Law, because like we said, sonically it's really good, it's heavy, and it's inconsistent in a lot of ways too. And when I interviewed Michael Sweet, I don't know if you guys brought this up at all, this album, but I talked to him about it. And I told him, I said, when you get to the end of the album, you've got songs like Caught in the Middle and All for One, and they sound pretty much like the natural progression of where, Christian Stryper would be going, or the previous version of Stryper. But then you've got all these other songs that are kind of more rocky and more I don't know if any of them were really sleazy lyrically, but maybe musically they fit in more with the 80s hair scene. So the album's kind of all over the place, and he kind of mentioned that he took a step to try to bring a few songs that were like the old style, and that's where you catch them kind of randomly through the album. But man, I don't know. I still think it's one of their better albums. I know he doesn't really look very fondly on it, which I understand. But it's a cool album. What do you guys think about it?
I think it's incredible. I remember when it came out. I was. Do I date myself here and admit that I was in my senior year of college at the time? But I distinctly remember getting into the long box. You remember the long CD boxes? that we had in the record stores at the time. I remember getting it and going, wow, what is this, right? It wasn't the usual, the logo, the lettering of Stryper was different. As you said, they got rid of the yellow and black. And then just the look, it definitely looked like, and you used a good word there, kind of a little bit of that sleazy, it's just really typical 80s hair rock. But man, I realize we all respect Michael doesn't like it because it has bad memories for him. Got it. We understand that. Now, the fans love it. It was just, I'm looking at the playlist, man. Just song after song after song. And yes, you're right. I think you're right. There's some things that are a little bit over the place in terms of, the songs like, Rock the Hell Out of You, Caught in the Middle, very Stryper sort of sound. Then other things like, Not That Kind of Guy, Two-Time Woman. You wouldn't have expected that from Stryper, but it just shows that they had the chops, that they could do it. And, dude, I just love it. It's great attitude music.
Definitely. Yeah. Wildman?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I would also add that, I remember them getting a lot of heat when that happened. And I remember a lot of people, the whole issue back then was if a Christian band went secular, or like Amy Grant, for example, did a secular song that, man, it was all over the place. Amy Grant's Leaving God. And so there was a whole trend of, man, did you hear with Stryper? They've left God. They've done this. But if you read Michael Sweet's book and if you look at the lyrics of the song, yes, it was different. But they didn't divert. I mean, it was all still a positive message. Every song was a positive message. Like for example, Two-Time Woman, it wasn't a bad message to convey that, hey, I'm not going to put up with that, that type of a thing. But I would also say that I think that in the early 90s, and I can't, this is just my gut feeling. I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but I have some. I think that in the early 90s, a lot of the hair bands were reaching their peak. However, the hair metal and arena rock was going out, so a lot of us missed it. So I see this in many ways as Stryper at their peak, because this was probably, at least in their first string of albums of their catalog before the breakup, I would say this would be the top one mature-wise, music and production-wise, compared to the other one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you're right. You're spot on, because if you follow other bands of that era as well, I mean, obviously I specialize in the 80s hair metal. If you look at like Warrant and Winger, these guys were evolving with each album, where they may have come out a little bit more cornier with some of the songs. They kept evolving and got more political and harder edge. You know what I mean? So it was a sign of the times. And it was just, you know what? Let's face it. It's what bands do. If you don't evolve as a band, then you're kind of probably a boring band. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, let's touch on one that I think everybody had. Well, this will be an easy one to talk about. To Hell with the Devil. I mean, this is when Stryper becomes a household name. And I guess the question I want to throw to you guys is, like, how did they do it? How did this Christian metal band become a household name? Because really, if you think about 80s metal, the message of Stryper does not fit in with the 80s metal message. You know what I mean?
Right.
Well, they became a household name the way that every other hair band in the 80s became household names, and that was with their ballad.
Yeah. Yep. Honestly. Yep. You're right.
Right. It was honestly that broke the MTV top 10, in videos. And you think about it, Poison, Every Rose Has its Thorn, and so forth. So as much as we love the hard rocking, the metal aspect, and if an album had 10 tracks, 9 of them were going to be hard and in your face. Yet it was the ballads that really broke all these bands.
Oh, yeah.
For a lot of people. So you ask, how did it happen? Well, it was clearly the song "Honestly."
Yeah, and I agree with that too, and I think that that's one of the ways that bands really made it. It was the ballads, the power ballads. That was the power ballad era. Honestly, I used to compare Honestly to Motley Crue's Home Sweet Home. that type of a connection that they made with that sound. But I would also say that To Hell with the Devil was when Stryper made it big, and I would say that they made it big because they were so confusing. People didn't know quite what to do with them. You had, as Michael even stated this in his own words, but you had the metal community who discarded them because of their message, and then you had the Christian community who discarded them because of their music. Mm-hmm. And they were right in the middle of controversy wherever they went, and controversy always brings attention. And whether they did this intentionally or not, whichever way, I think that's one of the reasons why they became a household name, was because, like, for example, my parents, I wasn't even allowed to own that album when I was, my friend had it, went over there to listen to it. And because when my mom heard the title right away, she was like, "We don't talk that way here. We don't say that. We don't say to hell with anybody, even the devil, whatever." And then, of course, if they looked at them, oh, my goodness, that was the end. You said we're going to get into that later. But I think it had a lot to do with they hit a market stride right in the center where they were able to connect with both sides of the fence in a very confusing way that brought them a lot of popularity.
Yeah.
Well, and you said it there with the title, right? To Hell with the Devil. It's a bold title. It catches people's attention. It's a little bit edgy, more edgy in 1986 than in 2021. And then I think you add with that edge, I would add the original album art. Most people are going to know about the angel art.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and which is what I originally had on cassette. Was the angel art, and you've got this kind of comic book style art. It seems like comic books and metal have often kind of been in the same neighborhood with each other. You've got the four members of the band just looking, ripped as angels, and you go, man, that is just cool. And certainly on their first three album covers, there's no question it was the best of the album covers. So I think you put that in there, and it just hit at the right time.
Another thing that I think about with Stryper is there obviously were other Christian metal bands that were similar to them at the time that didn't get as big. And you know what I think it comes down to with Stryper is they write good songs. They write great songs, actually. And they're very talented musicians and singers, because we just said Against the Law, it was a totally different vibe, but it was still incredible. The reason that is because they're a great band and they write great songs. And that's why people who weren't necessarily Christians gravitated to the music, because it was great music.
Right.
Well, and Mike, I want to just tag onto that. I think you make a very good point there. These guys were also hanging out with the secular bands.
Right. These
guys were playing the Whiskey. They were playing Gazaris. They were playing the Troubadour in Sunset Strip. And I remember seeing them on the In God We Trust tour, and White Lion opened for them. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. So they're in that market where they're not just playing, Christian festivals. They're not just playing churches or that sort of thing, but they're playing the clubs. They're playing the arenas with the secular bands. And so that also gave them a broader audience. But I also think, from their perspective, evangelistically, they're going, there's a lot of people that we want to reach here. So, yeah, I think that was a good combination.
Yeah, and signing with Enigma Records, the same records that signed Motley Crue. The first Christian band to be on a secular label. Mm-hmm. That whole thing, I think that just opened up their connection to the whole world, and the whole idea of them musically. The other thing I'd add to it, and we might get into this later in the show, is that you hear a band and you're like, especially in the Christian market, because I was huge in the Christian market and Christian rock and metal when I was in high school growing up, and there was always like, hey, you got to hear this band. Why? Well, hey, they sound just like Def Leppard. Put them in. Hey, you got to hear this. They sound just like. I could never do that for Stryper. Stryper seemed to have their own distinct sound, and they didn't try to copy anybody. Right. And I think that's another reason why they were so successful. Yeah,
I agree. Another album, I had it at number 1. Steve had it at number 2. Wildman, you didn't have it on your list at all. We'll scold you later on that one. Is Soldiers Under Command? Steve, give me your thoughts on Soldiers.
Well, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Wildman for not having it on the list at all, and I assure you, Mike, that Wildman and I will be having that out.
Why does this always happen to me?
No, it's interesting, especially making these lists. As I was really thinking, like I said, I was really thinking about it again this afternoon, and I didn't want to build my list in any way based on nostalgia. Right? If I did it purely based on nostalgia, Soldiers would have been number one for sure. To Hell with the Devil would have been number two. I would have been In God We Trust and Against the Law, because that was the era that I first knew them and first fell in love with their music. So I really just wanted to listen to it just musically. And I got to tell you, man, every time I cue up, and I know Michael would like to re-record the entire album and bring it up to speed in terms of production, 21st century quality and all that sort of stuff. And I think it would be fantastic to listen to. We heard some of the tracks when they re-recorded things on the Second Coming album. But when I listen to that original 1985 recording, it just does it for me. It is metal to the core. And I really mean it's metallic. There's a metallic sound to it, and I love that original recording. Again, the songs I'm just looking at is one after another. Of course, the title track, but come on, The Rock That Makes Me Roll, and probably one of my all-time favorites. When I see them in concert, now of course we have our phones. Everybody's got their phones out to record things, and I'll always record this song when I play it. It's Surrender.
Yeah.
Surrender has got to be one of the most in-your-face, just a punch-in-the-face song. I love it musically, and again, I love it lyrically. Because here's the other thing, and this is something that Wildman and I talk about a lot on our show. We're convinced that there's no musical genre better suited for proclaiming both the gospel of Jesus and the Christian life than hard rock and metal. Because that message is so powerful and so strong and so transforming. This is a song that's talking about surrender. Freely surrender. Open up into his majesty. You go, that's kind of a strange lyric, right? Shouldn't it be about go out and conquer, go out and kill? No, the Christian message is surrender because he is the king. And I'm going, I just love that mix of sound and lyric on that album.
Yeah, no, you made some great points. Wildman, why is this not on your list? Defend yourself.
Well, there's a couple of reasons, if I could share. But, I think a lot of it has to do with To Hell with the Devil was the first thing I heard. That was the first album that I ever heard from Stryper. So I kind of backtracked into Soldiers. And for me, the message is strong, the music is great, the lyrics are just as solid. The reason Soldiers is around number 6 for me is probably mostly for the production. The background vocals were not as rich in harmony as their later projects, and that's really what I gravitated to was the harmony of the vocals and the harmony of the guitars together. And so when I heard To Hell with the Devil first and went back to Soldiers, then it was kind of musically it just kind of didn't fit the same peak that I was hoping for.
Okay.
But I will say, great album, no question, and definitely at number 6. And Steve's going to talk to me about moving it up more later, so we'll get into that.
Well, here's what's funny about me with this album. I'm the same as you. I started with To Hell with the Devil, so I had to backtrack to Soldiers Under Command. And I'll be honest, for probably all my teens, I really never got into the album very much. And for some reason, in my adult years is when I've gravitated to the album. I'd play through it, and then I'd be like, first of all, this is their second album. They're writing Michael Sweet's writing songs like First Love. I mean, these are amazing songs. And there's a lot of fun songs on it, too, when you think of something like Together Forever. You know what I mean? It's just so many cool, fun, rocky songs as well that are just catchy, And I think song-wise, it's just got better songs than To Hell with the Devil. I think those were the two I was tied with, although I think To Hell with the Devil has stronger singles. Obviously, the singles are just monsters, as well as the title track. But I think song for song, I think this just has more. You can listen to it all the way through and just, at least for me, and just love all the songs. So this one grew on me. This wasn't a nostalgia fest for me. This one grew on me later on in life, but like I said, I just really dig this album. Even The Devil Believes. Why don't you guys give your thoughts on that one? Obviously, it's the newest album.
So, when it first came out, and I'm similar to Wildman in this regard, I fall in love quickly, okay? And so when I hear a few songs off the album, or I've heard the whole album through once, I've pretty well made up my mind what I think about it. And then I'll listen to it for a while, and then I'll come back to it and say that first opinion really holds. I got to tell you, even The Devil Believes just pound for pound knocks it out of the park. Production, off the charts. Everything, the bass, the guitar, the drums, the vocals, it's mixed so well. Again, Michael has his hands all over that thing as a producer and really knows what he's doing, really brings it out. Production value off the charts. The musicality of it, just the music is phenomenal. Again, just in your face. For God and rock and roll, I mean, that is an anthem. If this were the 80s and they were still playing arenas, that would be one where the entire arena would have their fists in the air, middle finger Messiah, same way. And then for me, it's lyrics. Now, Michael disagrees on this, and this is one I've said it, I think, even on our show. And Michael, if you're listening, I hope you don't unfriend me on Twitter because of this. But you're wrong, and I'm right on this one. Okay, it has to do with the lyrical depth. The lyrical depth on this whole album is just unlike anything else. And that's not to say that the other albums were shallow. They're not. And again, I think Wildman had touched on that earlier. There's a lot of great depth in a lot of their songs. But this one, just song after song, whether it's deeply scriptural, just the phrasing and the wording, do unto others, let him in. These are just such strong lyrically. So production, music, lyrics, knocked out of the park. And let me just quickly add, the album cover means a lot to me. And while I don't necessarily judge an album or a book by the cover, they have to go together for me. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I loved about No More Hell to Pay. The art was just fantastic, and just, to me, the art, the color scheme, everything worked with the sounds and worked with the music. This album cover, oh my goodness. Here you've got great winged Satan, dark, bowing before the throne of Christ, glowing, and you got this imagery straight out of the book of Revelation. I'm going, oh, dude, and it's as metal as it gets. So really, it's just 4 for 4 for me. That's why I love it.
Wildman, what do you say?
Yeah, I have to be able to say this without mentioning names. There's a lot of 80s bands out there that are still trying to match what they did back in the day. And one of the reasons why this album deserves to be on the top 5 is because look at these guys, look at how long they've been doing this, and look at the range Michael Sweet continues to have at his age after all these years. They play so tight together, with Robert on the drums and Oz and with the newcomer Perry Richardson. Really tremendous sound. I mean, they have really honed their craft, so to speak, and that has a lot to do with it. And I would agree with Steve on the message. I'd say over the last few albums that Michael Sweet has been a part of, not just with Stryper, but also his solo albums and his stuff with Sweet and Lynch, he has not diverted in any way from the message. His message has been strong all throughout, and I appreciate that he did not take this time to divert from that, but to actually get, as Steve said, even get deeper into the lyrics. I mean, you compare the lyrics to this one to, To Hell with the Devil or Soldiers, there's definitely a difference in depth, and that has to do with maturity and his writing has matured and so forth. But yeah, that's why I love the album. We watched their live stream. My family and I did. I think Steve did as well. Watched the live stream where they did a live concert for us here recently, and that was just incredible. It was just glued. I mean, there was no stage. There was no arena. There wasn't anything that you're used to. There wasn't even really a light show. They're just in a studio playing, and they're so good. It just made me we just watched it, and it never took our eyes off of it. It was just incredible.
Now, this album, I'm going to be completely honest with it. I haven't spent enough time with it. I've listened to it a few times, and I definitely like it. But you guys can probably relate. What kind of happens in life is you're busy, you're working, and then you're doing your podcast, and you're editing this. And for some reason, months will go by, and I should have been listening to that a little bit more. Why? What happened? Where did it go? And then, that's my big regret. But I need to listen to what you guys are saying and give that album a chance more. But one thing that I'm agreeing with you on is the depth of the lyrics, and I think you've touched on a good point. When he was younger, and it's a maturity thing, and they're great lyrics. They're just very straightforward. And if we go to the Murder by Pride album, one song that really stands out for me is 4-Leaf Clover. And that one is so cool because, like as a Christian, there's no such thing as luck. It's like you're blessed. You're not lucky, you're blessed. You know what I mean? And I think it's such a cool way to twist all that. No such thing as a unicorn, And once again, it's saying the same stuff, but it's saying it in a different, unique way. And it sounds like, that's what he's been doing on all these modern albums that Stryper have done. And I think that's cool.
Well, I'm going to throw a thing in there on your preference for that particular album, Murder by Pride. I didn't have it in the top 5, and in terms of just my overall listening enjoyment, I like the heavier stuff. But at one time I had a playlist that I had made that I just titled for myself, God Speaking Through Stryper. Okay? So there were certain songs I would listen and I'd go, oh, man, God is just really speaking to me through that lyric. I'd throw it on that playlist. I had more songs from Murder by Pride on that list than from any other album. And then they were not the really big, heavy music songs. But, Mercy Over Blame.
Yep.
I Believe. And one of really my favorites is Run in You.
Yes.
I just want to run in you. I just want to be in you, Lord. And there's so many times in my life where I feel that way. And so I'm with you on that album. Didn't make my top 5, but I'm absolutely with you on that.
Now, one album you guys did not have in there, which I did, was In God We Trust. And when I interviewed Michael Sweet, I kind of asked him, I said, to me, as a fan, when I put this album next to To Hell with the Devil, they're almost like brother and sister, brothers, or you know what I mean? Like the first track is the title track, the second track is the single, the third track is the ballad. Like when you compare those two albums, They're very cookie cutter, compared to each other. And he said, it was deliberate. We had a big hit and we had some pressure from the label and we tried to recreate the vibe to an extent of To Hell with the Devil. Do you guys agree with that? Or, what made that not be in your list?
For me, it was, and I will say, like you with Soldiers Under Command, this one has changed for me over the years. Again, I remember being in college when I first got it. I got it right at the same time as Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood. And part of the problem was I ended up comparing the two. Mm-hmm. And I felt that the Dr. Feelgood probably hit a little bit harder. I felt that this is a little bit more poppy in sound. Yep. And what I came to realize was it was a little bit overproduced, I think. And I think Michael has commented on that. Then in later years, I've listened to it again and again. I'm going, wow, this actually is a really good album. It really stands up. I think probably all the band would just as well prefer if they'd not recorded Come to the Everlife. In fact, I think Michael kind of teases Oz about that one. But the others, they really are solid songs. So yeah, again, a little poppy for me at times. Was again why it didn't make the top 5, but it certainly could have, and certainly in terms of 80s hair metal albums, I really just stayed back in that era. This would be right up there.
Yeah, and I think too, I appreciated the Stryper sound that continued in that album. They didn't divert, and it was the classic harmony with the vocals, harmony with the guitars, and I forget how many tracks I think Michael said they actually did for the vocals, but they just kept layering the vocals over and over to the point where he thought it was overproduced. He thought that they probably tried to do it too much. But I think, as you already alluded to, Mike, I think the problem is that, when a band or any artist of any type hits what they did with To Hell with the Devil, where do they go from there? The album that follows that is never going to be as good as the album that they did, because that got so much notoriety, so much, and they really couldn't beat it, at least not within a couple years of producing that one.
So since we've talked a lot about To Hell with the Devil and In God We Trust, let's talk about the image and some of the videos from this era, because they're outrageous in a lot of ways, the image especially. Let's talk about the image of To Hell with the Devil. I mean, that's probably where most of us saw Stryper for the first time. And it's almost like Kiss in a lot of ways. They have almost like these fantasy shots where like Tim Gaines is the race car driver, and I want to say Robert Sweet has swords. I'd have to pull up the picture to get it all down, but they're almost like superhero-ish in a little bit in some ways. You guys buy that?
Yeah. I love it. Look, here's the deal. We're kids of the '80s, and that's what the kids of today will never understand, okay? The kids of today, you don't know how to have fun. Music in the 80s was fun, okay? This was big hair. The guys were borrowing their girlfriend's Aquanet, all right? So, come on. This was fun music. And so the videos were fun. Right, the costumes, the stage shows, the dancing and prancing is a part of that. Look, this was not Peter, Paul, and Mary. It wasn't an acoustic set in a 1964 coffee house. Okay, that wasn't what this was. Yeah. And so, I bought into it. And I think you say, well, that maybe looks silly compared with something else. And I go, well, at that point, maybe you're comparing, apples to oranges, right? I don't think you can't compare a Stryper video or a Motley or a Poison video, with Mozart. That's just a ridiculous comparison. And if you're going to do that, then you've already got
Mozart did have the hair as well, Steve.
Seriously, the old boys, like, they had their powdered wigs on. They had the velvet jackets. Come on, those guys were proto heavy metal.
They had their own version of spandex as well.
That was the beginning of glam.
I mean, the first thing that I like to say when people look at Stryper and say, "What is that?" I say, "Well, that was a different era." And if you look back at that era, what band wasn't doing that? Right. Now, Stryper at times might have taken it extreme. But you look at other bands, there's a lot of similarities to the hair, the look of the hair, the spandex. I mean, it was all over, and that was just what you did. If you were into metal, that's what you did. The big hair. I mean, I had the big hair. I mean, as Steve talks about his rock box. All of us had that, and I appreciate what you're saying, Mike. That it is fun. And I think that focusing, as Steve said, too, about the fun, that to focus on the fun more than the controversy that it brought is probably a better route for us to go.
Yeah.
And I don't think they were really any more outrageous than anybody else. I mean, seriously, look at C.C. DeVille's hair in Poison.
Oh, yeah.
Right. They were no more ridiculous.
No.
Than Motley or Bon Jovi on the Slippery album and tour. Come on, look at that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One thing that's also interesting is in the videos, they had really big stage productions. I want to say it's in Always There For You. I got it. In that video,
Always There For You.
Yeah, there's a part where they're dangling on chain, like they're like on triangles that are held up by chains, and then there's these giant Stryper logos that take up the whole stage. And what always blew me away is that I don't think many of these items went on tour with them, because I'll watch tour videos and there's a little bit of a show, but it's not like this video. And it's like, did they produce all these things just for these videos? Because I mean, it's a huge stage show that they put on.
Yeah, it was. There's no question about that. And I think Michael alluded to it in his book, how much effort and how much money was put towards those productions. And I don't know what you guys think about when you think about the 80s videos, but the part that I love, the part that just kind of gets me in the nostalgia feels, is the moment where the video the video's following the storyline or the plot line, and then it's usually on the last chorus or the last verse, it transfers into the live concert. That's the part that I just love, that transfer over, and the crowd's cheering and the band continues to sing the song.
But you also have to understand, too, or people of today who did not grow up in that era have to understand, this was the first time that you had music television, where you had specific videos made to go with songs and broadcast on television. And just as bands today have had to learn how to harness social media and really know how to use it well to promote themselves. That's what the bands had to do in the 80s with MTV. And it's a visual medium. Okay, so again, you're not going to have some stripped down, small little set, kind of thing. No, this is visual. We want to see big. We want to see color, right? We want to see explosions going off. And so part of that had to do with that medium.
And you hit on a great point. This was the beginning of music television, and it's so sad that it doesn't exist today, the way that it did in the 80s. But there was money behind it. So like you said, you could do this kind of stuff because there was big money behind the production, the producing of the albums and the videos. And now it's like everything's been so condensed. If you're not on a major label, you get a lyric video. And really, when you think about it, how could we have gone backwards with this stuff? When you think back to the direction of even Michael Jackson, Thriller, and all these different videos, they were like little movies. And to think where movies went, with the Avengers and Star Wars, and to think the music video, for the most part, just went backwards or isn't a thing. It's pretty sad.
It is. And I appreciate the fact that Stryper continues to do the videos now. Like us.
and can we all just sit here and acknowledge 2020, October of 2020, Even the Devil Believes comes out. Stryper releases this video, Do Unto Others. It crosses the 1 million view mark on YouTube.
Wow.
This is a band that started in 1980, was 83. In 2020, they're now able to produce, and it was a classic video. If you think about it, Wildman and Mike, you watch that video for Do Unto Others.
Yes.
It's one of those story videos.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, and there's the shots of the band, and then there's the shots of the story, right, going along with the lyrics, and it weaves back into the band, and then there's the band walking along the streets of the town, and so forth. And that thing crossed 1 million views, which is just unbelievable for not only a band from the 80s, but for a band that's producing this kind of music, because let's be honest, this isn't the hot music anymore.
No.
I mean, it's not. It's not the hot genre. Metal was for the hot genre for the decade of the 80s, and it hasn't been since. So for them to do that is extraordinary.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah, you forget that about that when you think of the numbers. That's big numbers. And once again, it'd be great if it was still a channel where you could watch it on your TV. But that's not the way that people absorb things today. Everybody's on an iPad. Everybody's on a phone. So maybe it's where it's supposed to be right now. I don't know.
maybe, or maybe we're on the verge of seeing the beginning of the Metal Mike, Wildman, and Steve TV station.
Oh, yes.
Yep, it's got to happen. Well, you know what? You just brought up a great point. Why don't you tell everybody how they can watch your podcast until that network, that channel starts? How can people watch your podcast? Where do they go?
Well, basically, you go to wildmanandsteve.com, and you'll see the shows that we do and the feed. We're putting out an episode every week, and wherever you get your podcasts. So we're on iHeartRadio, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Cast, you name it. We're everywhere. I mean, not us exactly, but our show is everywhere. So yeah, wherever you get our podcast, if you want to know information specifically about who we are, wildmanandsteve.com is the place to go. Or two men going through a midlife crisis.com. You'll find us.
And you can also follow us on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Wildman and Steve. So at Wildman and Steve, Twitter and Instagram, and Facebook.com/Wildman and Steve. So just find our name and you'll find us there.
Awesome. Well, hey, guys, it was a pleasure talking some Stryper with you. I knew you guys were the right pick for this job, and I think we did a great job going through them. And it's fun going back and listening, and you guys made great points. And for those listening, if you haven't listened to some of the newer albums, hopefully this discussion helps you to realize that they're still making great music, and you can find it easily on Spotify and YouTube. So definitely check that all out. Well, thanks a lot, guys. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having us, sir. It's been great.
Thank you.
It's sad to say goodbye to my buddies Wildman and Steve, but we'll talk again. We'll talk soon over on their podcast, and I'll keep you posted on that. Till then, rock on!